When it comes to advising disbelievers, I want you to consider this conversation between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Musa alayhi salam. Allah is speaking directly to Musa, and here he says, اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go, both of you, Musa alayhi salam and his brother, go to Pharaoh, for he has truly transgressed all bounds. Go to him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرَ أَوْ يَخْشَى. Speak to him gentle and kind words, so perhaps he may be mindful of me or fearful of my punishment. Pharaoh is someone who is arguably the worst man that has touched the face of this planet. He rapes women. He kills children. He kills men for the fun of it. He literally claims to be God on earth. Allah is telling Musa alayhi salam, one of the greatest human beings that have ever walked the face of the planet, to go to one of the worst human beings that have ever touched this planet and to speak to him kind, gentle words. Perhaps he will become mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or fearful of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I ask you by Allah to reflect. When you guys interact with your friends and family, are you interacting with people who are worse than Fir'aun? Those people you speak to every single day who are disbelievers, whether it's a colleague at work, whether it's any disbeliever, I promise you, they are not as bad as Pharaoh. And so if Musa alayhi salam, who is someone we're nowhere near as good as, is to speak to Pharaoh, who is the worst person, gently, how about me and you when we speak to disbelievers who have some goodness in them and they just need to be guided to the right direction? Again, when it comes to disbelievers, we must always be gentle and kind. That should be our default state of communication with them to start with. You see? But I'm sure me and you know that when we speak to disbelievers, sometimes if they're insincere, they can sometimes disrespect us and sometimes insult our deen and so on and so forth, correct? And so this is the next question that we're going to answer. If we're being gentle and kind with them, because that's the default state that we should be with them, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, what if they overstep and they disrespect us? What if they overstep and they insult our deen? What should we do? Are we allowed to become harsh and angry? Are we allowed to shift from this gentleness and kindness? If you guys remember to the verse that we mentioned earlier, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, أَذِلَّةٍ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَعِزَّةٍ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. They are humble with the believers, but they are firm towards the disbelievers. At that point where the disbeliever loses respect and he insults you, or he does anything that is kind of not good towards you or your deen, at that point you become firm and you let them know that they need to stop disrespecting you. So if they start insulting you or mocking you, you say, hey, listen, I'm giving you my time. I don't need to give you my time. I'm being kind to you. I'm trying to speak to you about a topic and you're losing respect. If you don't stop, I'm going to leave you alone. You're not worth my time. You see what I mean? You become firm. You hold your ground. Muslims don't turn the other cheek. If someone tries to overpower us, we overpower them. Do you see? And so when someone speaks to you and they start losing that respect, you stand up and you say, no, I'm not going to take that. If you carry on like this, I'm not speaking to you. I'm not even going to entertain conversing with you. I have other people who are actually willing to listen. If you're not willing to listen, I'm going to walk away. You become firm. You see? There was a battle known as the Battle of Uhud that the Prophet ﷺ took part in. And to cut a long story short, it was initially a decisive win for the Muslims, but because the Muslims made a mistake, it became a decisive loss. The Muslims took a huge hit. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he took very many injuries where even the helmet that he was wearing actually pierced his cheek and went into his jaw and pushed a tooth out. You see? So the Prophet ﷺ was disheveled, he was in pain, and there was bleeding down his face, and it was a very difficult experience for him. When the disbelievers were going back to Mecca after having won and they were all celebrating, one of the disbelievers at the time, he became a Muslim later, Abu Sufyan, he shouted towards the Muslims, "U'lu Hubal," glory be to Hubal. Now Hubal is one of the gods in Mecca, right? He's one of the gods that was worshipped, one of the statues. And so what do we see happened in that situation? The Prophet ﷺ, despite bleeding, being disheveled, being in so much pain, he did not let that comment slide. And so he looked to Umar radiallahu anhu because he knew he had a powerful voice, and he said, answer back to him. Don't let him get away with that word. And so Umar al-Khattab, he responded, he said, Allahu a'la wa ajal. Allah is greater and more glorious. You see? From this we learn something very important. That when the disbeliever oversteps and they try and overpower you and take that emotional victory over you, you don't let that happen. If you speak to disbelievers, be very kind and gentle. But if they overstep and they disrespect, you become firm and you let them know that you cannot continue like this. But what if the disbeliever persists in his disrespect? What if they keep pushing the bounds and they insult you more and more? Can we ever insult them back? Can we just lose our temper? Because it can get very frustrating at times, right? Absolutely not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. O believers, do not insult what they invoke besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they will insult Allah spitefully out of ignorance. So if you go out of your way to insult them back, that can be the cause of them insulting Allah, and you do not want a share in that. And so you should never ever insult the disbeliever or their gods so that they do not insult Islam and our God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see? And so in that case, what do we do then? Because we have a bit of a dilemma. You're having a conversation with someone, they overstep, you've told them not to overstep, and they continue overstepping and they make you more and more angry. What do we do in that case? There's another story in the time of the Prophet ﷺ that gives you the answer. One time the Prophet ﷺ was sat with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and a man came to them and he started insulting both of them. Imagine the scenes. Think of how much Abu Bakr, the right-hand man of the Prophet ﷺ, loved the Prophet ﷺ. They were sat there and the man came and he started insulting both of them. And so both of them, they remained patient to start with. The Prophet ﷺ had a smile on his face. Abu Bakr was getting more and more angry inside. And as he was insulting more and more and more and more, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he couldn't handle it. He erupted. He insulted the man back. As soon as he insulted the man back, the Prophet ﷺ walked away. And so he stopped insulting the man and went towards the Prophet ﷺ. He said, Ya Rasulullah, are you annoyed at me? Why did you walk away when I was defending you? The Prophet ﷺ responded and he said, إِنَّهُ كَانَ مَعَكَ مَلَكٌ. Verily there was an angel with you that was responding on your behalf. But a shaitan appeared at the time that you responded with that insult to the words that he was giving you. And I do not sit in the presence of the shaitan. Subhanallah. And so now you can think about the things that you see online, Speaker's Corner, the crazy stuff that happens. Now you can see and identify where the problems are. The reality is that when you are speaking to a disbeliever and it becomes clear that they are ignorant and they do not want to learn and they're only there to cause problems and waste your time, you walk away. End the conversation as soon as possible. The reason why we do that, guys, is we have 24 hours in a day. As callers to good, as people who want to benefit the world as much as possible and give as much dawah as possible, we must pick our battles wisely. And so this is generally how you advise the disbelievers. And if you do it the right way and you follow this framework that I've given you, the results will be incredibly fruitful. Let me tell you of a story of a man known as Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Early in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, or in the dawah should I say, the Prophet ﷺ, he met some people from Yathrib, which is what Medina was called before it became Medina. And when he met them in Mecca, they actually converted. And they asked the Prophet ﷺ, can you send someone back with us so that they can teach us the deen and give da'wah in Yathrib, where there was no Muslims at the time? The Prophet ﷺ, being the visionary he was, he chose Mus'ab ibn Umair, one of the greatest companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Young man, in his, 20s, early 20s. And so he went back all the way to Medina to start teaching the deen. And as he was teaching, many people started accepting Islam. Multitudes of people were accepting Islam. And this started to enrage the leaders in Yathrib. And one of the leaders was known as Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. And he was so angry at what was happening, at the corruption, from his eyes it's corruption, that he was causing in his own society, that he picked up a spear with the intent to kill Mus'ab and started marching towards him filled with rage. And as soon as he arrived, Mus'ab saw this spear, but he remained calm and gentle, just as we've discussed. And when Sa'd said to Mus'ab that if you do not leave, I'm going to kill you, Mus'ab just simply responded, look, you're a wise man, you're intellectual. Why don't you sit down here for a second? listen to what I say to you. If you like what you hear, you can accept it. If you don't like it, then I'll leave you alone. Does that sound like a fair deal? That calmness and tranquility that Mus'ab presented to Sa'd instantly calmed down Sa'd, and Sa'd decided to sit down and listen. He came back to his senses because of the kind and gentle demeanor. Now, I want to ask you a question before I tell you the rest of the story. If Mus'ab said, go on then, go on, do what you want to do, and pushed back and then stood up to fight Sa'd, he would probably be dead, correct? If he was harsh in his approach, like, why are you trying to kill me? What are you trying to do? Do you know who you're speaking to? The Muslims are going to come for you. They're going to kill you. It's not going to lead to anything good. He would have just put the spear through him, right? But here, remained calm, kind, gentle, said a few words, and then Sa'd sat down to listen. And when Sa'd sat down, Mus'ab started explaining Islam, and then he recited some Quran very beautifully, and from that Sa'd converted, one of the leaders of Yathrib, and his conversion led to a mass conversion in Medina that ended up being the largest number of people to accept Islam in one sitting. So think about it, from the beginning of Islam, the largest group of people to accept Islam in one go was because of this interaction. SubhanAllah. And so if you follow this framework, then I promise you, you are going to see wonders, inshallah ta'ala. And so we've said a lot, so I'm going to summarize very quickly. The default state of communication that we have to have when we speak to disbelievers is one of kindness and gentleness. If the disbeliever oversteps, we become firm and we let them know they need to stop and we set the boundary. But if they persist, then we walk away and we go to the next person. Simple as. This is how you deal with the disbelievers.